Welcome to Midnight's Edge in the morning. Amazon reminds us we don't own the movies we have on digital, and with us, special guest Andrew Hawkins of In Search of Darkness documentary here on Midnight's Edge in the morning. Happy Halloween. Well, night before Halloween, so it'd be All Hallows Eve or Eve. I don't know. Welcome everybody to the show. My name is Tom. As always, with me is the boss man, Andre. How you doing, good sir?
Greetings, everyone. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm sure they'll all answer back. And just like me, I'm doing the best I can, even though we're an hour late. I've got a Mandalorian show to watch. Packed day full of stuff. But we have a great guest with us today, Andrew Hawkins of the In Search of Tomorrow and Darkness documentaries. Welcome and hello.
Hello. Yeah, that's right. It's both. But right now it is Halloween season and we're all about 80s horror, and In Search of Darkness is our number one until we move forward to sci-fi. Yeah, it's great to be on, and happy Halloween Eve.
Yeah, it is the day before Halloween. No, speaking of, your campaign actually ends tomorrow at midnight, correct?
That's right. Halloween at midnight. That's the last chance to get what we're offering.
And we do have the link for that in the description. We'll also share it as we go on here throughout the show. But tell us a little bit real quick before we get going on things, a little bit about yourself, Andrew.
Yeah, of course. I'm Andrew Hawkins. I'm a producer on the In Search of Darkness series. That is a documentary series, and we are currently selling In Search of Darkness Part 2, and it is all focused on 1980s horror movies, including the talent and celebrities and producers and writers and composers and everyone involved in those films, as well as people from today who have been heavily impacted by 80s horror film and have carried that with them into their careers, whether they're musicians or wrestlers or video creators, what have you. But yeah, I am part of this amazing team putting out these great marathon length documentaries that cover some of the movies that we all love the most.
Awesome.
I also have to say that you have a great community going there, and we've also participated with it with a number of watch parties, which have always been great fun.
We've had a wonderful time with you on.
Yeah. And Tom, you saw Evil Dead with them recently, didn't you? So everyone
just last Sunday,
yeah. So everyone should absolutely join the Into Darkness community and be there for future watch shows, and of course get the documentary, which is gonna be tremendous. I have no doubt about that. And we're gonna talk more about that later on. But first, Amazon is suddenly dominating the headlines, and not quite in the way that they would have liked. Tom, do you want to take us through that story?
Oh, well, yes. Let me get the story up here. I should have had it ready. That's my fault. Trying to do 20,000 things at once. But Amazon is reminding us once again that we do not own digital copies of movies, as we had pointed out many times before, as we've talked about in the streaming war situation of things, when it comes to physical media and how important it is to actually own physical media nowadays. But Amazon urges users don't actually own their content, and this stems from a lawsuit that's been brought about by Amanda Codell last April, where she sued over an unfair competition and false advertising. She claims the company secretly reserves the right to end consumers' access to the content purchased through its Prime Video service. She filed her petitive, case, I can't talk this morning, clash action on behalf of herself and any California residents who purchased video content from service from April 25th to 2016 to present. On Monday, Amazon filed a motion to dismiss her complaint, arguing that she lacks standing to sue because she hasn't been injured and that she's purchased 13 titles and nothing has been removed from her content. But she does bring up an interesting point, and being a class action lawsuit, That doesn't necessarily mean it has to affect her alone. But this is something we brought up many times here, that you do not technically own the content when it comes to digital. Even if you can download it, a lot of times you have to use the proprietary app to play it. I know that's the case with Vudu. I'm not sure. Can you even download stuff with Amazon? Help me out, folks, on that one. I know Disney Plus you can, but you have to have the app, and it's as far as I know, it's only on tablets and phones and stuff. You still can't download it to, like, your television or PS3 or PS4 or anything like that.
I can answer that. You can download it to have it offline, like Audible style,
Right.
but you cannot take it away from the device that it's meant to be played back on. You cannot, of course, if there's a will, there's a way, but like most normal people can't actually retain it in any way, shape, or form. So you buy it, you can keep it in your personal library. Individual jargon may vary from service to service. But the moment that they decide that you've had this long enough and we don't want you to have it anymore, either because it's going back into the vault, Disney style, or because the license expired, Netflix style, doesn't matter if you purchased it, doesn't matter what you paid for it. The moment that happens, it's gone from your library, even if you think you bought it.
Yeah, even for me, I have a handful of movies downloaded to my phone, but just like most everybody, I can't do anything with it outside of them. That's just it. There's the real restriction to that proprietary service, and it's something you guys are absolutely right. You don't really own this content. If they want to take it off their servers and it vanish, and you go to play it on demand and it's gone, that's that.
Yeah. That is indeed right. And of course, this was a long time coming. This is something that Hollywood has wanted for a very long time, because on services where you buy, that's buy in quotation marks, what you in reality do is you rent, only for a longer period of time. But it wasn't always like that. Tom, why don't you take us through how this started with the days of actually, I believe it was Betamax, which was the first format in which consumers could actually buy movies. And not everyone in Hollywood were too keen about that idea.
Oh, yeah. Well, since the beginning of this whole idea of having films at home, which kind of started back in the late 50s, early 60s, they started to produce different types of videotape and disc possibilities moving into the 70s, and the studios were all on board with disc possibilities, which at that time were basically records with films on them. This was before Laserdisc kind of taken over, and Laserdisc was kind of also part of that whole thing, but those things were kind of on the side, and studios were more than willing to get behind those because you can't record them and they're hard to copy. But videotape, on the other hand, much like the audio cassette, which some people may still be familiar with, is easy to copy, easy to record on, and easily transportable. And that scared the hell out of them, because all they could see was, oh my goodness, our movies are going to be pirated and we'll never make any money off them. And the same thing, the television industry said the same thing. Oh, we'll never be able to sell our commercials again because people will just fast forward through the commercials. And at first it seemed like this big whole thing. They even tried to go through Congress to stop home video. But yeah, Betamax came into the picture. Then VHS kind of killed Betamax at that point. Laserdisc kind of lingered in the market for years until, we've gotten to where we are now with Blu-ray, DVD, and digital. But it was always a thing where they kind of have an FBI warning right on the videotape that says, you do not own this movie, which is true. We don't. Everybody kind of knows that. But when you have it in your hand, they have a hard time coming to get it from you. Like, they would actually have to come up with a warrant and saying, we're here to collect this film and da-da-da-da-da. And technically they can do that, and there's nothing you can really do. And they may not even need a warrant if they can prove they're the studio in that case. But that has never happened in my recollection ever in the history of film.
Yeah, but they're not allowed to go into your premises if they say that, well, we have records that say that you bought a DVD copy of the original Star Wars back in 2004. Please hand it to us. Then you can say, well, I don't have that anymore. although it's on proud
My point
display in
was,
your
though,
shape.
basically, technically, they could do that by law, but they have never done that. On the
Yeah,
other hand,
I
that's
don't think that
literally
they
what they're
can go
doing.
in, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean they could ask for it back, but that doesn't mean they're going to get it.
No,
Because like we
exactly.
had it's instances when I had my video store where if the studio asked for certain things back, you were technically liable to do that. But like you just said, we could just say, oh well, we don't no longer have the tape. It's been broken or lost or whatever for years, and they would never have an issue with that. And that was very rare occurrence. And there was very rare reasons for it that I can think of offhand, other than 9/11. Which was the stupidest thing I could ever recall in the history of video stores. And I'm not even going to go down that whole thing, but that was just because there was a big list of movies they wanted us all to pull. And I'm like, are you crazy? But anyway, no, but that's basically what I just explained, though, is what Amazon can do. And iTunes and all these other companies, because they don't technically own the copies that you're watching. They're just on their servers. They're licensed from the companies. And at any time, if those companies, like you said, decide that, they're not going to renew their contracts, these things can come off. And we've seen this already with music services. Amazon itself has already come under fire, unironically or ironically, because at one time the book 1984 got caught up into some legal wrangling and got pulled down as one of the many titles that has been pulled down from time to time. And it was just, one of those things where people are like, well, where did it go? It's like, it's gone, folks. You can't get it back once it's gone. And they can't just give it back to you. It's not like they can just go, oh, well, here you go, our mistake. They don't have it anymore to legally give to you. It's a really kind of convoluted mess. But I think Amazon's biggest problem here is the way they got everything worded. And that was a big, long fucking diatribe. I'm sorry about that.
Well, it's interesting. It reminds me of a really notorious film that I'm a huge fan of that has been basically locked in the Warner Brothers vault for decades, especially its extended version. And it's Ken Russell's The Devils that came out in 1971. And it was so incredibly controversial that it went through multiple cuts, just heavily censored, until it was basically a fraction of what its original intent was released on tape. But it has shown up periodically on iTunes to purchase. And it's so rare to be able to get that it immediately, the last time it was actually uploaded in full, was basically taken down after only being on for a couple of hours. And if you had bought it in that period, in that small window that it was available, and didn't download it, according to iTunes, that's on you. And it's a really difficult, thing to have to deal with, because a lot of people covet these sort of lost films. And it's funny too, talking about the tapes and people coming and basically taking your possessions from you. When the video nasties era was going on, that was happening, because there was a lot of distribution going on in the UK. And this was during that period where they had the list of films that were essentially banned for distribution in the country. And it was, something that a lot of people wound up really seeing a government involvement during.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the one incident I was going to bring up as an example where the physical copies, were actually literally went after by the police. And
right.
In this case, there was a lot of bootlegging involved. But again, the whole point was, at that time, I believe it was 40 years ago ish now.
Early mid 80s.
Yeah, that they decided that these films were not to be distributed legally within the UK. And unfortunately, on that list, Evil Dead came up among many other films that probably did deserve to be on that list, but there was a few that didn't. And over time, those films have found their way to actual legal releases in the UK. And Clockwork Orange, I think, was one of those films, if I'm not mistaken, as well, for many, many years that was not allowed to be released. There's quite a few on that list that's I don't have in front of me, but I know you guys cover a lot of that in your documentary, right?
Yeah, especially in Search of Darkness Part 2, where we expand into a lot of international releases, like some of the films that were on that list from directors like Dario Argento, Lamberto Bava, and Lucio Fulci. This was, something that really impacted fans of the horror genre and fans of film in general. And in talking about these movies and how they were made and how they've been interpreted since their initial controversies and being banned in certain countries and winding up on the video nasties list, we really go into depth about how impactful they are and how we look back on them 40, 30 years later. And we appreciate them for being part of that really unique movement in time in these genres.
Right. And not only that, it may not just be the movie itself. Sometimes it can be the version of the film. Now, we've seen just recently where there was a bit of controversy with the film Splash on Disney Plus because they crop off a couple of scenes very oddly to, and it's not even really nudity. It's just kind of brief, almost nudity, I guess you could call it. Because, I mean, yeah, she's naked, but they don't see any of the actual bits. But they make sure you don't see any of the almost bits. Now, so they got it really oddly cropped off. And then there was a strange version of Back to the Future that wound up on Back to the Future 2 that wound up on Netflix that a friend of ours, Justin Proper, discovered, skipped over one quick shot of the Ooh La La magazine for some reason. And the excuse given was, it was some other region's edit, and it wound up accidentally on the American version. But as we've been pointing out, like, this is something that can happen at any time with zero notice. And we see it more frequently now, or at least discussed more frequently now with the current day politics, where they're like, well, this isn't necessarily acceptable, so we have to change it or alter it. And that's something I can see really hitting horror hard if it's something that takes off, Andrew. And I know you know what I'm getting at, because, you know, just a lot of the tropes that go into a lot of horror films are quote unquote problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is too, some of these themes are discussed in these movies because they are representative of different characters and appropriate to the story. And yes, you will see a lot of things that aren't politically praised or accepted in our current climate, but that's because of the story. You have this genre that is essentially built around concepts of fear and threat and harm and danger and survival. And there's not always going to be a safety catch there where everything that you think is morally right and acceptable or within the certain parameters of a current social climate, it's kind of a all hands, all bets are off sort of situation where you look at some of these films, specifically, you know, movies from international releases and slasher genres from the States and things like that. And not everything in those films are considered acceptable in a lot of different circles.
Right. And again, that's where the idea of, you know, we may not lose a movie, but they could fucking alter it to the point where it's like, what did you do to this movie? And we've actually seen that in movies all the time. They're like, oh, by the way, we found all these extra scenes that got cut out. Great examples just recently, Psycho. Not a bunch of scenes, but enough scenes that where everybody's like, oh wait, there was stuff that was cut out of this that nobody even realized. And they added those few shots back in because they were in the original initial release prints, but they were cut after complaints. And that was a few extra knife stabs and things of that nature. But again, that just shows you how little things over time can get lost and people just forget it. They just forget it was even there to begin with. And I see that becoming more of a problem necessarily than us losing a film altogether to the hands of time or, you know, copyright law anyway.
Yeah, film alteration over the decades is something that's getting more and more regular that we're seeing. And it's really interesting that you mentioned Back to the Future 2, because we're covering that in our upcoming watch party for In Search of Tomorrow, our 80s sci-fi community. And on a rewatch, it was interesting to look at the film that's being distributed now versus the film that I grew up with as a kid. And it's the same thing with the original Star Wars movies that, you know, alterations have been made. And I'm personally a fan of film preservation and supporting creative intent, if that makes sense. It's essentially,
absolutely, to me anyway.
Yeah, saying that, you know, I want to see the movie the director and the writer and the producers intended to make if they all have that synergy and work together to, you know, creatively have something to show. But even seeing something like Biff tossing the almanac when before there was never this CG little, you know, illustration animation going in the scene where he's talking to old Biff. It's like, well, yeah, why bother? I guess somebody must have complained and said, oh no, that's a continuity error, we need to fix that with visual effect. But you're absolutely right, stuff like the splash thing, stuff like, you know, films being improperly cropped, or just minor censorships because of some people saying, no, I don't want to see that. Well, that's an issue that we're seeing more and more all the time.
Yeah, I constantly hear little things dropped, like just lines, like little lines here and there in films people have noticed.
Sure.
I mean, again, there's things that you're going to sometimes run into, like with, you know, licensing and stuff, where they'll have a different song in a version of a movie or something to that effect. And there's nothing you can really do about that. But when they're just dropping a line because it was problematic, now you're starting to mess with the director's original intent a little bit more than I think is acceptable.
And you could be altering the story and changing
Absolutely.
the outcome for certain characters. Like, if a bad guy is a bad guy and he's doing bad things throughout the film and saying bad things, and there's the eventual outcome where he gets what's coming to him, why not keep the bad stuff in? Because you're rooting for something, you know, morally effective to eventually happen and help resolve the story. I mean, it's, you know, all of these components. Yeah, if someone says something negative in a film and they're eventually the antagonist and they're going to, you know, have something happen to them at the end to resolve the film, why not just keep that stuff in there? Because it just sends the point home further. Why have to cut it out because someone's saying, oh, I don't like that and it doesn't agree with my sensibilities? I don't know. What do you think, Andre? Do you have any?
Yeah, you've been quiet.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to get in the way of you gentlemen that have such insights in this, maybe more than I do. No, I think that that it's rewriting history to make any kind of alterations whatsoever, especially in light of modern day sensibilities. Because here's like the thing, that it's so easy to judge content of the past. But here's the thing: how will the past judge you for your own judgment of your own immediate past? At some point, you are the one that's going to be judged, and how will that verdict be? Well, I think part of that is how tolerant are you to different, from different viewpoints, even things that we have long since left behind. Things that then made it into feature films. They were part of the culture at the time. To deny that is to deny history. So whether you like it or not, whether it was wrong or not, it was there. It was made, and it's now a product. It's not just a product. It's an artistic expression, and I believe that is something sacred, just like a book. It's not something that should be changed on modern whim. Like, you don't go back and rewrite Shakespeare or indeed any pulp author of like the last 50 years or something. That's there, it stays, and it should be the exact same thing with feature films. And yeah, there are like two things that trouble me. One is when you try to alter things a little bit, like Back to the Future 2 and Splash, which again, it's like this tiny little thing, but it's a slippery slope, because where do you stop?
Exactly.
I mean, like that thing with Splash.
Yeah.
That's something that I would have expected the priest regime in Iran to have done. I wasn't expecting that to be done on Disney Plus, yet there we are. I mean, put it on Hulu then. Like, if that is so inappropriate that it can't be put in that film, then don't put it on Disney Plus in the first place. Then put it on Hulu instead, where you have like a slightly different profile. And that's such a harmless example. I mean, like for instance, Clash of the Titans, the original one from, what was it, 1981, 82,
81, I believe, 82, 81, yeah.
Yeah, you have like a great film, absolutely great film, but you have like a similar scene right there, which from certain sensibilities is probably going to be even worse, because there you have like a full butt shot of a naked mother and child, and that I'm sure is going to give loads of people a fit today. But still, what you do with it
in a PG movie, no less. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, so what you do you censor it? Do you ban the movie? I think that in that case, you'd probably censor the movie, and I don't know exactly the streaming status of that movie, if it's available anywhere to stream. But if it is, I would not be surprised if that scene has been cut out. It's available on all physical media, but in streaming in this day and age, I don't know that scene's going to be allowed to be there, which only goes to show that you have to keep your own library of things that you like. Because, yeah, it's true, they have like the FBI warning that you still don't actually own your physical media. No, it's true, you can't. You're not supposed to resell it. You're not supposed to show it in public. Technically, you've only licensed it for use in your own home. However, that is for use in your own home, and no one can take that away from you, try as they might. If it's inside your shelf, no one's going to come in and take it out and step on it or anything. And I think it's important that everyone has a library. Let me give one example which goes far, far back than the 80s. In my opinion, one of the greatest movies ever made, not just horror, but period. It's the original Nosferatu from
Yes.
1922. That movie was an unsanctioned adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. They only changed the title or the name of the count from Dracula to Orlok. But it's basically the same story. And because of that, there was a court order that every single physical copy of that movie was to be found and destroyed. Thank God we had some private collectors that kept it. That is why
Absolutely.
we have that movie today, because they destroyed nearly every single copy of it. I don't recall exactly if it was just a handful or just one copy that all copies that we have today is derived from. But that was in the hands of a private collector.
I
Had
think
it
it's
not
a
been
handful, but yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I also think it's a handful, but if we say it's that you can count them on one hand, and they were
Yeah.
mostly private collections.
Yeah,
That only goes
because
to show.
originally, I think only a short version of it was available, and then like in the last like 10, 15 years, they've got almost the full version now, up to like I think the 2-hour version. I think it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew. That they've found bits and pieces of over the years in people's collections.
Yes, and I believe that the collection or the collected version of all of the film elements that have been recovered is out from, I think, Kino Lorber now.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it's on proud display in my DVD shelf, or Blu-ray, to be fair. But yeah,
But that's a great point. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The importance of having a decent physical collection. And if you have the physical collection and you think it takes too much space, like nothing prevents you from like ripping it and having a lossless copy on your Kodi or something. The important thing is that you have a copy that no one can take from you. And I think that's really important, because it's like so easy to think that, oh, we have everything right now. It's never going to go away. It can easily go away. I mean, there's movies released like 5-10 years ago that came out on millions of DVD or Blu-ray copies at the time. But if they're not on streaming and they haven't been reissued since, they're, before you know it, they're going to be gone. You're not going to be able to find a copy of it anywhere.
Yeah, I'm just glad we live in a digital age to where, like, even though it's kind of the bane of the film's existence at this point, going back to my original point, at the same time, we're lucky that enough people have copies preserved. And I'm going to bring up a few examples just to show why your own self-preservation is kind of important. And, why I think all three of us, I can speak for here on the panel, feel very strongly about film preservation in general.
Yes.
But I mean, you look at a film like Song of the South that hasn't been available, I think, only but once on home video, and maybe not even in the US, I'm trying to recall. But it's a movie that's unavailable, but people have gone to the extreme to where if you don't have to try very hard to find a 35 millimeter HD print of that film. And I'll tell you what, folks, it's not that great of a movie. Like, I feel like if it was available now, people wouldn't give a shit because it's not a good movie, not because of the content. You know what I mean? It's just not that great of a film. Everybody remembers the one song in the Brer Rabbit bits, but outside of that, it's boring as shit.
Yeah, kind of like from the era of Pete's Dragon and a handful of other movies.
It was
that
actually
Disney
way
had put
earlier
out.
than that, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But then another great example is Star Wars. I mean, George Lucas has chosen not to allow us to legally have, pristine HD copies of the original films. So, us as fans, as a community, have gone above and beyond in several different ways in making sure that people can get their hands on said versions of films. And then you have another great example is E.T., where Spielberg, changed things in the film and then was like, oh God, I'm an idiot, and changed it back and then tried to pretend that version never happened.
The version with the walkie-talkies and stuff.
walkie-talkie,
Yeah, with the
gun.
walkie-talkies.
Yeah, and the CGI ET. And another thing though is as far as like people coming in and stealing your movies or destroying them right in front of you. Yeah, I don't really see that happening anymore, Andre, unless it's George Lucas. If he finds out you got the Star Wars holiday special, he's coming for that someday.
Well, Andre, to talk about sort of what you were mentioning, this is another story that's very similar to what was going on with the release of Nosferatu and how all of the original 35 millimeter prints were essentially banned and opted to be destroyed. There was a film, and this was during the Federico Franco period of rule in Spain in the 50s, late 50s. The film Viridiana was extremely controversial with the church and also with the government at the time. And when it was made by director Luis Buñuel, the lead actress, Silvia Pinal, had to literally carry the last reels of the film that hadn't been destroyed after their government had said this needs to be completely wiped off the face of the earth. She wound up fleeing from Spain into France with the final reels essentially in grocery bags, and was able to get through customs and keep the film in preservation. So from then, we've had different conservation groups. We've had Janus Films, we've had Criterion Collection put out a fantastic version. And it's one of those examples that those people in power in certain ways throughout history can really determine what you are going to get from these creators. So when you see something like a more modern example going into my wheelhouse, something like Dario Argento's Tenebrae, it was heavily censored for international distribution, not because of any sort of government order. It was because, and this is what used to be the case, if you had an unrated or an X-rated film, it wouldn't get regular distribution in theaters or be marketed in normal commercials. And you would have to suffer those cuts to be able to get it in front of people. But since we're in this digital age, yeah, you can release an unrated film all you want. It's just, is it going to actually make it to the audience? And is a service going to take it down as soon as they find out what kind of content's in the movie?
Right. And I mean, here's the thing is I feel like film it should be preserved just like art. I mean, we wouldn't go in and willy-nilly mess with the Mona Lisa because we don't like the fact that, the look on her face looks like resting bitch face or something. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to allow us to do that. It's not proper. And again, unless something is actually not art, like if it's an actual snuff film or something like that, then you're talking something different. But I mean, in most cases, all these films, especially ones that were on like the video nasties, they were just entertainment.
Yeah, they were fictional narratives.
Exactly,
they were stories that were, put to film. They weren't real life accounts of anything that's morally or ethically wrong. They're just art and movies and made for the sake of entertainment or value in one way or another. And yeah, I'm all for, preserving that, because just like looking at real history, if you don't look at what actually really occurred, how can you learn from it moving forward?
Exactly. I mean,
Indeed.
and we gotten a little off the main track, but we still are kind of, and that's the thing is there's so many different ways that a movie can be pulled down from a digital service than you can imagine. And the fact that people are still shocked to learn this shocks me, even though it's like, well, I mean, I get it, because looking at it from a point of view who somebody isn't in this kind of industry or close to it, it may be something that catches them by surprise. And again, this doesn't just affect films. This affects books. This affects music. This affects everything. It's something that is becoming increasingly a problem, in my opinion, in the media arts in the last few years has been this alteration or deletion. And I've seen it in several different places that are just strange. I mean, I can give you a couple examples right offhand between, record albums that have had just songs disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes I can understand if it's a licensing situation, but a lot of times, no, it's not. It's because there's censorship involved. And that's where I have a big problem, is because, you know what, I'm willing to negotiate the idea of having a warning label on something, which I'm not a big fan of, but I'll take that any fucking day of the week over them just going in and changing something willy-nilly.
Or removing it altogether.
Exactly. Yeah.
Especially if it's property that I've purchased and that I, in quotes, own. If something that I own is now no longer there for me, then it was never owned to begin with.
Exactly. And I think that's where the only leg that this lady or this civil action or civil suit has anything to stand on, if anything, which is very, very slim, is the terminology. And as Andre pointed out before the show, the terminology, the legalese, and these things are so convoluted that they pretty much got a loophole in and out for everything. So I really don't see Amazon getting in any kind of trouble for this.
Oh, no, far from it.
No.
And here's the thing, that the only reason that we talk about Amazon right now is because they were the ones that were sued by someone who were shocked to discover that buy doesn't actually mean buy, as in you don't get to own, you only get to rent it. She was shocked to discover this, but this is the standard operating procedure with all streaming services. It's not just Amazon, this is true across the board. You don't buy, you rent, and the titles that you pay more for to buy and to keep in your library, well, you only get to rent those for longer. That's all that means, and nothing else. And here's like the thing that just to reiterate what we were talking about before we went live, they're covered in the contract, because it's going to like say in the top of the deal that you get to buy for this and that price or something, and then further down in the fine print, that's where it says buy. In this case, doesn't mean you get to actually keep it. You get to keep it, or says something that you get to buy it. However, with the addendum that they get to take it back whenever they see fit.
It pretty much says something as long as it's licensed to say
exactly. There's a hedge there, which means that they can say that buy in this case doesn't mean what you understand with buy, but what we say right here that it means, and that you agreed to by clicking next.
And I'll tell you one thing though. I did dabble for a while in thinking about becoming a lawyer, because you know me, Andre, I'm good at arguing. And there's one thing
follow Tom on Twitter for those that are
don't if you don't want to argue with me. But no, like there's one thing that if I was the lawyer for the civil suit, or if I was Amazon, I would fire their fucking lawyer right now, because he uses the term buy, because that's what this is about. They're trying to have the case thrown out. So they're deciding whether or not it's even going to go to trial, if that's the proper word. But like the whole thing is he even used the term buy instead of rent, and I would have kicked his ass for that, because that's the one thing that if I was a lawyer for the other team, I would hang up on. Because if you look up the definition of buy, and if that's what they're saying, then you could basically argue that they are basically selling something they don't own. And even though they have that terminology in the contract portion of it, even though because of the fact that the lawyer said buy, because that's the first thing on the first line is the buy part of it, then basically what will happen though is it may go to some kind of trial. And like we've seen with the MGM deal, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but it was a really fucked up case, and I never thought it was going to go to court, and it did. But some guy sued MGM because he said they were lying on their DVD packages about the widescreen and full screen aspect ratios, and what he didn't understand was how open matte 35 millimeter worked. And because he had no clue of that, and then the courts decided that was enough, he wasn't expected to know these things. Technically MGM was lying on the widescreen full screen part of their DVD, saying you see more on the widescreen version of a film. That's true if it was filmed in Panavision But if it was filmed in an open 35 format, then the full screen version tended to have more on the top and the bottom, even though the director didn't intend for that to be there. So he won that case. He won it, believe it or fucking not.
Wow.
And a bunch of people got a bunch. Basically, if you actually were paying attention, you could have got a free DVD, I think, from MGM out of it. And that's what's going to happen here is they'll force Amazon to change the wording, and maybe all of us will get a free digital movie. That's it.
A free digital copy of the next U2 album, something.
Yeah.
Indeed. Guys, before we change topics, let us hear what you guys in the chat have to say by going through some super chats. Tiberius Monk 84 started this out saying, "This is for Tom Connors, attorney at law, and for Midnight's Edge. Thank you so much." And Matt G says, "I don't buy. I rent Big Macs from McDonald's now." Yeah. That's a nice way of putting it. And going back to that whole content warning thing, Dirty Soul Monkey says, "Look at the Whoopi Goldberg intros to the Looney Tunes DVDs.
Yep.
A black woman saying racist elements shouldn't be cut because it's history." Yes, so true.
I was actually going to bring that up, but we got kind of wrapped up in the rest of the conversation. Yeah. But I love the fact that you don't have to sit there and delete it. You just have her explaining that, you know, if you were to alter these or not present them, it is basically like acting like they didn't exist. And it's like acting like racism never existed. And I think that's the one thing that a lot of these people who want to, like, you know, cut and take away things that are problematic don't really understand, is they're deleting history. You know, it's very important to learn from your past. And then there's the other side of it, is I think they're just trying to hide the fact that, you know, things have always been diverse, and they just don't want us to realize. You know?
Yeah.
And but also anyway, that reality gives a great perspective too, because when you look at certain things like the censored content from, example, Disney's Fantasia, you see what was going on in the writer's room, what Walt Disney allowed through into the animation. And some of that stuff is very telling for what kind of people they were and what kind of things they wanted to show to their audience. So looking back at that, you can really get an assessment, you know, just from your own thoughts of who these people were, more than just what they were projecting with their censored versions of what their original ideas had been.
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
And there's a great question here before we get to the next super chat. True Rock Creations asks, what digital format are these Amazon movies using? 4K? Is there 4K media release of the same movie that you can buy? That's a great question. In most cases, yes, but not every case. I've seen a lot of cases where there is a 4K digital version, but there's not a 4K physical version.
Yeah, that's very often the case.
Yeah,
it depends. It depends on exactly from service to service. Amazon, in the case of Amazon, it also depends a little bit on title. Amazon aren't too big on 4K. Disney Plus and Netflix are very big
Voodoo
on 4K.
is as well.
Yeah, like for instance, you have like many classic Disney features in 4K on Disney Plus that you're never going to get a physical release of.
And the only ones you will are ones that you watch a lot. So if you like them and you want a physical copy, watch them. That's why we got Home Alone and Hocus Pocus on 4K Blu-ray. Yeah. And that's why we got Hocus Pocus 2 coming, because of the specific fact that I guarantee you, if we could get a peek into Disney's numbers, Hocus Pocus got watched a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, especially this month, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, that's a movie they've been teetering on for years and years and years, but now they've got some solid numbers to look at, and they can see that this is still a viable franchise. Yeah,
I still want the Black Cauldron in 4K.
Please, yes, it's on 4K on Disney Plus.
It is, yeah,
and it has never even been released on regular Blu-ray yet. Believe it or not, and I don't think we'll ever see it.
No, I don't think so either. I think that, again, that's a great example. The Black Cauldron, for those that like that, you had better gotten either the VHS when it came out or the DVD when that was available.
There was two different DVDs, yeah.
Yeah, Because between that and now the 4K release on Disney Plus, there was nothing. It was gone. It had gone back into the vault. So if anything, I'm surprised that they took it out from there. I'm very grateful that they did, but it only goes to show that they can take it off Disney Plus anytime they want. They're not going to do it right now because they want to build a platform. But if at some point in the future they decide that, yeah, we don't think that this is appropriate for the generation of kids growing up now, so we're just gonna quietly remove it. Nothing prevents them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is I think a lot of the streaming services are testing grounds. If the film is popular enough, it'll get a Blu-ray release. Because I think there was some truth to that article. We heard the rumor coming out that Disney was not going to release any more classic titles on Blu-ray and 4K, and only select new titles. And they kind of walked that back, but they didn't deny it.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing, and that's where I think the fine print was. The asterisk was there is like, yeah, shit like Home Alone and Hocus Pocus will get releases, but not stuff like Black Cauldron, because they know they're not going to sell enough Blu-rays to constitute a release.
Oh, I'm hearing here that Black Cauldron is edited too, done before release.
That was an old. Okay, here's the thing: the original, as far as I know, the original cutscenes do not exist anymore. They have the deleted they have some of the deleted storyboards and shit and test animation on the DVD releases, recent ones, but that's just because all that stuff was cut because it was deemed too scary. And then there is a couple other scenes that were trimmed, and that's why there's a few weird jump cuts in the movie. But yeah, there was like random cuts made to that film throughout, so like it was butchered to shit by the time it got to screen.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have seen Don Bluth show up with all of the deleted elements from the original.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a film that I absolutely love. And it's gone through so many issues where Disney and figureheads have said, oh, this isn't marketable. This isn't something that we want to define our brand. And looking at, from their perspective, what the results and what the metrics and the numbers actually are coming through on these views digitally through Disney Plus and through whatever other outlets they're tracking, you really can get a sense of, okay, they're banking on the big numbers. They're knowing that certain titles and certain IPs are going to be more marketable, and that's what they're going to move forward with. So it's interesting to look at the Disney Plus audience as sort of a testing ground, again, where so many people are checking what everyone is doing online and what's being streamed and what content's being clicked on the most.
Yeah, I mean, I did kind of a mental experiment with Disney Plus, and part of it came true. They had a select few titles, like Andre pointed out, that were in 4K on Disney Plus only. And when that article came out, I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. Is the couple of these movies that actually plays well, they're going to release, which they did with Hocus Pocus and Home Alone. And those are the only two we're going to see. We're not going to see Roger Rabbit. We're not going to see Black Cauldron, because if they were going to release them with these. This was the testing ground for that batch of films. I can't remember the other few that were in that, but
I'm interested to see what the next wave is going to be.
I'm depressed because I thought Who Framed Roger Rabbit would be one of them, but I know that must not be selling well because they've got that so reduced in price on Blu-ray that it must not be doing that well.
I guess there's a comment here
with people right now.
Yeah, maybe. There's a comment here that I would like to address. Tree Rock Creations, I put the comment on screen. What is to stop a person who has a Blu-ray media disc ripping it and converting it to a 4K format in the future? Are you familiar with the Star Wars Despecialized edition?
Yeah, well, I brought them up before.
Yeah, of course. We are not only familiar with, we are big fans of the Star Wars Despecialized editions. And that all of this basically underlines our point. This is why you need physical media. Because if you have that physical media, then you, as a fan, as someone that wants to preserve film, you can actually do a better job at it than the owner of the product in question. And this is certainly the case for Star Wars. We will never, ever get the original Star Wars movies in 4K or even on Blu-ray. However, thanks to the formats that have been out there, fans with technical know-how have been able to recreate them in the despecialized edition. And converting to a 4K format, well, that's going to require one hell of an AI algorithm
Well,
to do
there's
that.
actually
But in principle, yeah.
there's actually a 4K version available of the first film and Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Somebody found a decent print of each film, or cobbled together a decent print of each film from various sources, and they scanned it at full 4K.
Yeah.
The audio is a bit tinny. I want somebody to take the audio from the Harmy versions and mix it with the other ones, and it'd be perfect.
Yeah. See, all of this is why you need familiar media, because if there are sufficient physical media in the community, then things like this can be preserved. And again, we're not advocating piracy here. That's not what we're saying at all. Obviously, you have to own the official licensed version from the studio before you even think about entering into any kind of like fan edit or fan preservation territory. Like, those things are mostly for when there is no other official alternative. Like, there's no official alternative for Star Wars original versions. The despecialized editions is as good as it gets. And as I brought up before, as Andrew will remember, there's also the fan edits of Dune, which actually do a better job at getting out the director's intent than the studio approved version ever did. Again, this is why you need physical media, because with physical media you can actually do these kinds of preservations, but always not just because it's illegal not to, but out of common decency, you should still have the official copy before entering anything like that. And I saw it mentioned here. And if you are to go into any kind of like fan edit, getting those things, you need to protect yourself. You need to protect your privacy. You need to protect your computer. So for that, you need to use a VPN. And if you're gonna use a VPN, you might as well use the one from this channel's sponsor, namely Surfshark. So go to Surfshark and type in the code MIDNIGHT. And with that plug out of the way, let's do some more super chats.
But we stand by it because we do use it. So.
We do stand by it. Well, yeah, we use Surfshark. Absolutely. We use Surfshark. So great company, great product, great people. Absolutely do support that. And as you see, we are quite familiar with the despecialized editions. We obviously use Surfshark.
Well, and again, I don't know if you're aware of that, Andre, that they are the 4K versions out there now. They're trying to find Empire. But yeah, like I said, if somebody just mixes all the audio tracks from the Harmy versions, we'd be in heaven. Because I've seen clips from it, and they look beautiful. Oh my God, do they look beautiful?
Yeah, this is what is called a matter of time, because you have the community for it. So, okay, let's do some more super chats before we get into another physical media that you should all be supporting. Let's see. The last thing we said was Fat Steven Seagal says, Andre, my waistline is under siege. And Tom, cuddle? That's Fat Steven Seagal for you. And Cultured Casino sent us a cute little unicorn, which I'm sure my daughter will appreciate. And Cardboard Kenny says, shout out to all of my fellow high seas travelers, LOL. And Goddess of Whim says the much more appropriate, physical media for the win. And Diego Flores says, Tom, Andre has the pimp Viking helmet. He is not the boss man. He is the Jarl of Midnight's Edge. Jarl, by the way, is the original Norse version of the noble title Earl.
Jarl? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, that's the original. That's what was anglicized into Earl. Jarl, yeah. And Diego also says, and this is one for you, Andrew, a nice segue. Also, is there a way to get the first documentary as well to have the one more time? Also, is there a way to get the first documentary as well to have the full collection so far? Now, he's obviously asking about In Search of Darkness Part 2, the documentary that you are right now funding. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, and also if there's a way to get Part 1?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, right now we have In Search of Darkness Part 2 available for sale until midnight on Halloween. And what that is it's our newest 4.5 hour long 80s horror documentary with 4.5 hours of interviews and different features and subjects and discussions on a huge number of films. In fact, I love the fact that we have gone from the original mainstream favorites deeper into the video store, into international releases, into the more controversial and censored and often not released until years and years later, eventually, in their full intent. But what the sale is right now is it's In Search of Darkness Part 2. And purchasing the bundle that we're offering comes with our posters, our digital copies, and since we are selling direct to everybody, we are providing the digital downloads that once you download them, you own them fully. And this is for In Search of Darkness Part 2. But if you do want In Search of Darkness 1 as well, you can add that to your order. And in the checkout, it'll be right there as part of the full release. And when you get the copy of In Search of Darkness Part 2, In Search of Darkness Part 1 will be right there with it. And if you want to get the physical copy of that, you can select the Blu-ray or the DVD for In Search of Darkness Part 2, and you'll get the same format for Part 1. But we're really, really proud of this documentary. The first one has gone on to incredible acclaim. And it's been an amazing journey. And with Part 2, we're just going further into the discussion of this era. And we have incredible interviews from people like Robert Englund talking about his feature film 976 Evil, as well as his legacy as Freddy Krueger. We have Tom Savini talking about his work as an incredible effects artist and a pioneer in the field. We have so many great returning people coming back, like Kane Hodder, who played Jason Voorhees in a number of the Friday the 13th films, starting with Part 7. And we just can't wait for people to see this. It's something that, I stand by as for sure the best film I've ever worked on. And I'm happy that we can make it available to everyone.
Absolutely.
You want to take a look at the trailer, Andre? Or go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say that I also fully condone it. Like I have Part 1, and it's amazing, and I can't wait for Part 2. So this is something that you should absolutely order, like Jason Voorhees Lives has done. The link is in the description. I see it put in the comments, so go and order it there. Be sure to use our link so that they can see that we sent you, because that would be very nice. So that's a great way of supporting both physical media, the documentary, and Midnight's Edge in the process. And as you heard, Diego, you can then get Part 1 when you order Part 2 by adding that to the checkout. And now to let everyone see what awesomeness we're talking about, Tom, roll the trailer.
Yeah, here we go.
They're back! In Search of Darkness Part 2. I'm in this one. The 80s was the splatter decade. That was my decade.
There was something really dark and sexy and strange.
Crazy stuff.
It's like a roller coaster ride.
People love this stuff.
There really was a shift of a whole new generation of monster makers.
That was so clever and creative.
We were rock stars in the 80s.
Tom Savini came to us and said, I want to cut somebody's head off.
I was called the Sultan of Splatter, the Wizard of Gore.
I think it's one of the finest ways of murdering someone.
How could you let me watch that?
It was something that your parents hated.
That was one of the attractions of it.
It is just a shredder.
The essence of sex and violence.
It never ceases to amaze me.
I just couldn't get enough.
I remember having to stop it because it was getting so rattled. That's an image that I'll never forget.
Gives me chills thinking about it.
I love those Italian movies. They're just crazy.
The Italians just went there immediately. Just went boom.
Video nasties were a good thing for me.
A fake snuff film phase. Really?
Not very PC, is it?
Liquidate the Nazarene.
And I just remember thinking,
Hello.
this is fucking weird.
It was all about trying to understand the world around us, and the world around us was extremely hostile.
It's full of things that want to bite you and kill you and eat you. And that's just the humans. Revenge of the Nerds on steroids. You control a murderer.
It's more fun to be the bad guy.
Freddy bored into his subconscious and was maybe opening the closet door. And when people go, hey, what's it like to be in the gayest horror movie ever made? I go, it was fucking awesome.
I'd been bullied. I'd been an outcast.
I think that's really one of the first times that you saw what goth was all about.
All right. Talking turkey.
It's not just a one-note genre.
It's funny as hell.
I started growing hair.
It just all meshes together so perfectly.
Like horror of the absurd.
That's a funny moment, but it's scary as hell.
That is kind of what resonates with fans.
Hey, kids! Welcome to prime time.
Making the film was so interesting technically.
When he started to turn into a zombie, he had me on the floor.
Just remember, I gave him life.
You are all my children now.
Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
All right. And as you can see, the campaign is in its last 34 hours now.
Yeah, 2 days left, today and tomorrow.
So do not waste any time, guys. Head on over there. As we said, you can also get the first part as well. So do check that out. I do have a couple more trailers we may get to in the rest of the show, but if not, I'll do my best to share those over on Midnight's Edge After Dark, our sister channel, where if you want to check out some more clips, I've been sharing them all week long, and we even have a couple more that will be dropping here, I think, yet before the week is done. But yeah, this is an amazing documentary, and as these guys saw, this is not your run-of-the-mill, like, just you got everybody. Like, it's not just like some third AD, and a guy who worked on the makeup department. It's, Tom Savini, Robert Ing, like you said, these are the people that worked on this stuff. And it's just amazing the amount of people you've gotten to interview for these. And when you say it's 4 hours, you're not kidding. I mean, it is 4 hours long, and it is amazing the depth you guys get into in some of this stuff, and it's great. And it's comparable to some of the other great documentaries, if you guys have seen them, like the Crystal Lake Memories and the Nightmare on Elm Street one that come out a while back. But you also worked on the You're So Cool Brewster documentary that was also kind of reminiscent of stuff too. Yeah, from Fright Night, which is available on the Blu-ray now. And I mean, you guys do some great work, and I know you guys are planning on so much more, and we've worked with you with the In Search of Tomorrow and stuff like that. And you talked about the community in this trailer, and that's something we really love, because Andre knows, like we brought it up earlier, but we got to meet, like, at Kyoto through you guys, and most importantly Brad Dourif, which is, we were like giddy like little school kids, and that's the kind of things you guys get to check out with this. It's not just a movie, right?
That's right. The community is a year long after the documentary gets sent out, access to weekly watch parties, to our whole community group where we're always chatting with each other about our favorite movies, our collections, anything that we want to discuss news-wise, anything that's related to 80s or more, or horror in general. But we have people who come to these events that you're not going to be able to talk with anywhere else. Where else are you going to be able to sit down with Brad Dourif and talk to him a little bit about Child's Play before we all watch Dune together? Where else are you going to get the opportunity to send your questions directly to these filmmakers and these stars who were there when the movies were made? I mean, this is an access that we're providing to everyone who joins us, that you'll be right there with us, sending in questions for us to give people as we go through the discussion and then start the movie. And these events have been fantastic, and our community has absolutely loved it. And we're ready to now move into our In Search of Darkness Part 2 server. And our Discord is just going to keep these events going and keep having fun. And that's a really big value add to not only what we have in the bundle that's available until tomorrow night, but also just the film itself, because you'll actually be able to get to ask a question from someone who's a legend of these movies and a part of this history.
Right. And
I have to
go ahead, Andre.
I just have to add one thing to that, just to undermine like how awesome the community is. We mentioned Brad Dourif, and he's on screen right there, because to those that weren't aware, Tom and myself, we attended a watch party of Dune in the In Search of Darkness community with you, Andrew. And
Yes.
also attending was Brad Dourif. So then everyone watching were able to ask him questions, and so were we. And the answer to one of those questions made its way into the Ultimate Dune retrospective for Midnight's Edge. So that's like the documentary crew that I reference in that retrospective, and that was that watch party. And that is then some unique information which wasn't out before that made it into that retrospective because of this community and that watch party. This is absolutely something to join.
He also brought up another interesting tidbit about a week before it hit the trades that he had, and he brought this up during the Q&A too, that he had started work on the Child's Play series as well. Right. So you never know what you're going to find out. And those were just a couple examples we were lucky enough to be a part of. And I mean, you guys do them every other week, right?
Yeah, and just talking about some of these insights that you're not going to get anywhere else and that you're not going to find anywhere else. A perfect example of this is we were, just like you see in the trailer, we feature Maniac Cop, starring Tom Atkins and Bruce Campbell and Robert Zadar, directed by William Lustig, who's also very focused on film preservation and film history and bringing classics out on Blu-ray and 4K. And these are films that, you might never get an opportunity to see anywhere else, or even think that any other distributor could ever pick them up. But the great thing was that Bill was chatting with us while we were watching Maniac Cop, and he was essentially debunking almost every single bit of trivia on IMDb, line by line, saying, no, that didn't happen. We didn't get any trouble from the New York police when we were filming during the St. Patrick's Day parade. Everyone was drinking and we were all having fun. Yes, we were doing guerrilla filmmaking, but nobody got arrested. Yes, Lorraine Landon almost fell off of one of the government buildings, but that was only because she got too excited while she was doing her fight scene. And it was really, really special to be able to get that from the director of the film, to say, everything you've seen online is either wrong or just off by 1 or 2 points. And he really did put it into perspective from the source what went on during the making of his film. And we've gotten that from so many others, like even Kevin Van Hentenryck for Basket Case, and Laurie Cardille, who was on for George Romero's Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
And even Jeffrey Combs talking about Reanimator. I mean, these are people who were there, and their insights are straight from the horse's mouth. So being able to talk to them and relay questions from the community and the group, it brings a sort of exclusive access that no one else is giving out there. And, you know, we're actually setting the record straight on a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And not only, and the other great part about this documentary is, you know, as a film lover, being that it's 4 hours long and the amount of movies you guys are able to cover in just one of the documentaries, let alone, you know, the multiple ones that you guys are working on now, there's a list of movies that I have written down, or you guys have cost me a bunch of money I didn't plan on, because there's so many movies now that I've seen that I want to see that I haven't seen because of your documentary that you talked about. It's like, well, I got to get that one now. And I've got a stack of movies now to watch because of you guys. And I'm not saying it in a bad way. It's just like you guys have opened up my eyes to movies that I didn't even either knew existed, or I may have overlooked at the time, and like, oh wow, I should really go back and check that one out. So that's another great part about this documentary is, like, if you're a horror fan and you know you love things like Freddy and Chucky and Jason, there's a whole lot of larger world of horror than just, you know, the slashers or the films like Exorcist and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, I'm going to tell you right now. With In Search of Darkness Part 2, we've taken it even further. So that list that you've got is going to grow, because we have some really deep cuts on here that a lot of people have never seen. These are movies that thankfully have been released on Blue or have been distributed recently, but they're also films that, you know, we personally want to feature and show people, and have people like Jackie Kong talking about her movies, The Being and Blood Diner. And those are real cult films that have some really interesting things to say, but they've almost been lost to the sands of time and to multiple releases and to the end of the video store era. And even in the segments that we do, we have films featured that people might not know about at all, like so many, like you're talking about, slashers that were made post popular era of guys like Michael Myers and Jason, that the Italians did because they wanted to capitalize off of that, you know, real interest. And they became so creative and so, you know, outside of the box, just like Giuretta from Lamberto Bava's Demons is talking about. There are some really unique stories and some really incredible movies that have been made, and especially in the 80s. And as we go year by year, we feature those. So maybe you'll find something that you've never heard of before, and you might make a great night out of it.
Oh yeah, so many great finds. Now, Andre, one thing we are here, and I say this in the beginning of the clips when we on the Midnight's Edge channel or After Dark channel, and it's very true. We are huge fans of horror, and it's something we don't get to talk about enough. What's some of the films that you might have discovered now since getting into these documentaries that you didn't know about before?
Well, there are a number. Like, for instance, to me, the Reanimator sequels, that's like something that blew me away. And also like more of the related movies and some of the slashers. But yeah, especially Reanimator. And then I don't mean the first one, because that I was aware of already. But I had kind of like dismissed the sequels. I had dismissed the
Bride of
Beyond.
Reanimator and Beyond Reanimator.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like the Beyond Reanimator, that didn't do much for me, but just the Beyond, just that one, that was like,
whoa, is the Beyond. Yes,
what a movie! And I wasn't even aware of its existence before your documentary. To be honest, that's one that I had missed out on completely. But that's one that I sought out because of In Search of Darkness, and blew me away.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'm a lifelong personal fan of that film. In fact, the history of that movie coming to the States, it had been bootlegged and copied and gotten poor quality releases for years and years. And then, interestingly enough, it was a roundabout way through Lloyd Kaufman at Troma, and then via Quentin Tarantino himself through his Grindhouse label and through his old A Band Apart labels. He had gotten the distribution rights in the mid-90s to be able to bring it to the US. And he had all these screenings going on at the Grindhouse Theaters and the New Beverly Theater in Hollywood. And it had wound up on the cover of Fangoria. And I found that just, browsing at a gas station one day, picked it up, learned a lot about Lucio Fulciana's film output, and just immediately went from there to try to find out as much as I could about him as a director. And since then, I've essentially studied him as one of my favorite creative artists behind the camera. And being able to share that with people is one of the biggest things that we do this for. We get the stories, we get the impact, we get the insights, and we put all of that into essentially an encyclopedic, retrospective, lengthy documentary package, so we can all watch it and enjoy it and review it and celebrate it. And that's the whole purpose, is so we can really keep the history alive.
Awesome. And on that, there's someone who knows you here. Jacob C says, I pre-ordered this the moment I realized basically every one of my problems I had with the first were being fixed. I can't wait to watch. Also, hi Andrew, it's Jake Calta from Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. Yeah. And, that's something too, is that we really listen to the audience feedback. And because of the success of In Search of Darkness, we made sure to make In Search of Darkness Part 2 the best possible film and package that we could. So we just went all out. And the whole purpose of doing what we've done is to get it directly to the audience, to get it to you, to get it to the fans. So when you buy, you get the physical copies directly from us, and you get the bonuses and all of the extras and everything that's included in the bundle. And then you get the digital copies that you directly own, because we want to make sure that you're not getting this through a third party that might not have it somewhere down the line for whatever reason. You're getting this from us, and you're getting this right now as we're in the middle of sales until midnight on Halloween, because that's the time, and we're just basically celebrating October and Halloween this year. And yeah, we love the fact that we can give this to everyone.
Yeah, fantastic. Speaking of giving to everyone, someone already got it. Diego Flores, who asked about the possibility of getting part 1 as well. Well, while we were talking, he got both. He
awesome.
says, well, I got both documentaries. Being honest, I can't tolerate horror, but love the behind the scenes of horror. So yeah, you're definitely got something awesome. So yeah, thanks for getting that. You will not be disappointed. I promise. And while we're on super chats, I just want to get on with the remaining ones. Vince Manor said, one thing we have learned is that piracy is not a pricing issue. It's a service issue.
Yep.
Gabe Newell. Indeed it is.
Yep.
And Saint Redwolf, I guess, says, DMCA needs to be reformed. If the companies release it, they need to archive a non-encrypted original for when it goes out of copyright. But again, that's something you don't have to worry about with In Search of Darkness, because as you said, Andrew, there you actually own the copy, even if it's digital.
And it's directly from us. And that's one thing that I absolutely advocate for, is when you are buying your physical media, go direct. That's such a good relationship to have with the people who are actually making it available.
Yeah.
So that's something that we absolutely advocate for, and we do that so you can always have it.
And I can even give your customer service a very positive critique, because my dumbass, when I ordered this, wasn't paying attention. And I thought it asked me if I wanted an additional copy of this movie for $15, not realizing it was the first movie. And I said no and clicked past it. Well, in my infinite dumbness, realized like a dumb shit that I screwed up, and I got a hold of them through their customer service. They had no clue who I was, so it's not like they're being, giving me special service because I'm Tom or anything like that. And I said, this is what I did. I fucked up. Is there any way I can add the original? And like that, I got an email back. They're like, no problem. Just go in and, take care of it on your end. And boom, it was done. So like, that's the thing, folks. Even if you muck something up like that, it's so easy to deal with. And the quality of these films, I mean, we've been, pushing it, but we're pushing it for a reason, guys. I mean, I've gotten a little ribbing about it, but it's like, you know what? I stand by this because this is the stuff that I love. I will watch this kind of stuff for hours and hours and hours. Like, when I get in trouble for not doing something I'm supposed to, this is probably the type of stuff I'm doing, is watching stuff like this. So
I can confirm this to be true.
Well, I'm not making films to get people in trouble, but one thing I will say is I do the exact same thing. And if I'm on a task and I have something in the background, it might be a marathon long documentary. It might be a great YouTube video. It might be something that, I enjoy having playing along with whatever it is I'm doing. And that's a lot of feedback that we've gotten too, is that so many people have just thrown this on a Sunday morning and gone about their day with tasks and whatever chores or laundry folding or what have you. And then one movie comes up and all of a sudden eyes are on the screen and it gets written down on the list. And now someone's found a new film to go and check out and enjoy for the week. So getting that kind of, discussion and being a part of that, it's something that I love because I grew up a video store kid. And when someone would recommend something to me and it turned out to be great, I love that. And I've always enjoyed keeping the discussion going, because if I can watch a movie like Lucio Fulci's The Beyond and I can tell someone the value of that film, and then someone like you, Andre, watches it and tells me that movie was fantastic and I loved it, that's rewarding for both people. And it's just a cool thing to have.
What's even better than that, or at least in my opinion, is the self-discovery of it.
Yes.
And I'm glad you bring up the 80s, the video store aspect. And that's kind of what this documentary for me kind of is. I don't want to say it's a replacement for, but it's, and I hate to use the term, but it's true, almost like a pacifier for. Because instead of me being able to go roam the aisles at a local video store, digging for that obscure horror film, I get it presented to me here. And then I write it down, and then I get a chance to see it now. It's not the same, but it serves the same purpose. And there's that self-discovery again of, something that I found that, is mine. And like you said, I can introduce to my friends, because I was always that person as a guy, hey, you got to check this out. So like, to me, that's the great part about it, is discovering films that, like I said, I overlooked, missed out on, all this great stuff that you guys are bringing into the mix. And not just to mention all the classics that I adore, everything from Nightmare on Elm Street to Little Shop of Horrors. I mean, the gambit is just so, you guys talk about all different sorts, not just slasher films. I mean, you even bring up the Italian horror and all kinds of other great stuff. It's just amazing. The width of the not franchises, but the genre that you cover in these documentaries is amazing.
Yeah, we like focusing on film history, and we like focusing on this era and this genre. And one thing I'll say, really quickly is that, like you're talking about with walking the video store aisles and looking at the cover of the VHS tapes and thinking about, what do I want to get? Do I want to pick up Evil Dead, or do I want to get Dead Alive, or do I want to get Nightmare 4? Even if you watch the documentary and you're familiar with all of the segments and all of the film features and all of the stars that are in it, you can see, like, even in this poster that's featured on the front of the site, in between every movie, we have a wall of basically VHS tape covers and posters that, while we're guiding you to the next film that we're going to be discussing, you might even notice one that's just hanging out on the screen that you've never watched before, and it catches your eye, like Demons right there, or the corner that has Shocker, or at the very top in the middle, Extra. So we want to, really do as much as we can to highlight the entirety of this era, because, that's what we all grew up with, and that's what we love.
Absolutely. And ironically, we talked a little bit about Extra with Robert Shea. So yeah, check out our interview with Robert Shea if you're into that kind
Bob
of stuff
Shea.
To tide you over in the meantime.
So cool.
Oh, Bob was a
Indeed.
dream come true. I mean, he's just an amazing gentleman. And I mean, if there's anybody who's a pillar in the horror community, it's definitely Bob Shea. I mean, he is responsible for a lot of the stuff that you got. I mean, from things from like Extro to the house that Freddie built, man. I mean, New Line Cinema is a big name in horror films.
Mm-hmm.
It was so amazing to hear how he built the entire company from scratch in detail. So
out of his back trunk of his car, basically.
Yeah. So everyone, if you haven't seen it yet, go to our playlist for star interviews and check out the interview with Bob Shea. That's Film School in a Box, corporate edition.
But yeah, that's a lot like the stuff you guys are offering here, and and you talked about just listening to it, but coming from an editing standpoint, somebody like me who does pretty much most of the editing here at the channel, I mean, you guys do an amazing job as far as the technical aspects, and you know, you can watch it's a glorious watch as well. You don't have to just listen to it like you're saying. So I mean, you guys did an
our
amazing
writing team
job.
and our editing team are fantastic with what we can deliver, and we take a lot of pride in the high quality level of documentary that we're able to put out. It's something that, you know, we've got a lot of feedback and praise for, and that's exactly what we've done. Is we've kept the quality very high and made sure that we're delivering the best film that we can.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
That's awesome. Now, is there any more super chats, Andre, before we had to head out? Or
Yes, we have a couple more super chats. I'm going to go through them. Drive-by commenter said, as the era of the cloud grows, redefining consumer rights and our ability to store and reinterpret content, the end goal for big tech and media is clear: exclusive control of public consciousness. That could well be the case. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I will say another reason why you have to preserve your physical media, keep a library of the output and art and creative expressions from a different era altogether. And yeah, I did the one from Jacob C. Did the one from Diego, and DMC. Oh yeah, and Mercenary X21 says Razorfish has a great video about the need for physical media. It applies to video games mostly, but the censorship isn't about money; it's about power. And finally,
can I just say something real quick?
Yeah, sure.
It's funny they mentioned Razor Fist because he is scheduled to be on next Wednesday, so check that out. And if you are a Razor Fist fan, you might want to check out Friday Night Tights tonight. That's all I'm gonna say. He may not be there, but I got a surprise.
Yeah. So everyone would be sure to check back for that. And about this live stream, Will R said, finally a chance to catch you live while at work. I've been listening the day after. Keep it up. Well, thank you. We will. And with that, I would like to thank you, Andrew, for joining us in talking about both preservation of physical media and what you do to that end, as well as also promoting the great artistic expressions of horror from the 80s and bringing them to a whole new audience. And everyone, absolutely go check that out. Link in the description. Go and support In Search of Darkness Part 2 and pick up Part 1 if you haven't done so already.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been great being here today, and always enjoy getting time to chat with you guys, and looking forward to the next time you'll be on one of our events coming up for the In Search of Darkness community, and whatever watch party we wind up doing. I know it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear the announcements for that, and I'm always bugging you about those. I love them; they're fun. So yeah, I think to take us out, we keep talking about the community. I'm going to play the quick trailer about the community before we go and say goodbye to everybody and have a happy and very safe Halloween. Thanks, guys, and thank you, Andrew, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and happy Halloween too, or 3, Season of the
Witch. Everybody is here because they love horror movies.
This is the best experience that you can have watching a movie with a bunch of other fans.
Now I have a group of people that I can watch these movies with again.
thing with In Search of Darkness, and this is something I've never seen, that it's a lot more than just the movie itself you're purchasing.
It's just a new kind of media experience.
We are giving everyone the chance to meet celebrities, ask Q&A questions, talk during movies, and it's amazing.
Oh, it's super cool. They bring talent from the movies.
You're going to be able to ask them questions about these films that you never thought you'd get the chance to.
I never understood why people like to be frightened, but just making the film was so interesting technically.
When he started to turn into a zombie, he had me on the floor. Some of that is still in the movie.
It's just such a wonderful experience.
The watch parties are a great opportunity to watch a movie that we get to all see as a group.
We're all synced at the same time. We're all asking questions. We're all chatting with each other.
Getting some insight into what went into the film.
You're discovering something new while loving something old.
Next to that movie, what I remember when I look back on it was laughing a lot.
Just remember, I gave him life.
Oh my God, I remembered what this did to me when I was a kid back then.
It's really fun.
What you're getting with In Search of Darkness Part 2 is a 4.5-hour documentary, but also you're coming along with us for the ride. Over 60 hours of content and a year's worth of entertainment.
From day one, you're part of the community. You're watching a film in your own home, but you're connected with all of us.
Well, I feel like my social circle has grown for sure.
You can establish like true, genuine friendships.
There is nothing else like it. It is the highlight of my week.
This has truly, literally, has changed my life.